And we are live from Buffalo, the Browns and Bills, set to kick off at 1 o'clock. Dan Labbe, along with Branson Wright, it is our cleveland.com live pregame show from Ralph Wilson Stadium. Branson, did you park in somebody's driveway?
No, I didn't. Somewhere on the side of the road. It feels like you're in Canton, for the Hall of Fame, where you can park in someone's driveway, or better than that, in their yard. So this gives you that feel if you're you're in Canton.
And the good news, of course, is the snow is mostly melted. There's still big piles kind of piled off to the sides, but everything's clear. It's reasonably warm here, the Browns and the Bills. And you and I, Branson, we didn't pick the Browns. What was your reasoning?
Well, my reasoning was, if you just go to my matchup today, my Sunday showdown with the offensive line against the defensive line, you're looking at a defensive line that has 35.5 of the 46 sacks that this team has. They don't have to blitz. And we know how Hoyer has been lately, and I think adding some pressure to the way he's been doesn't look like a good recipe for success. But we've been fooled before. You saw what happened last week. No matter how bad he played, they still pulled out the win. But as far as my pick's concerned, and your pick too, I think it just comes down to the pressure from the defensive line of the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, you go through the list. Jacksonville, the offense struggled. Why? Pressure. Houston, same thing. Tennessee, same thing. Those are teams that generate pressure. And this Buffalo defense, I mean, you could say what you want about the offense, and maybe that's what helps the Browns out and keeps them in this game. But this Buffalo defense is the real deal.
It is, and the best way for Hoyer to counter that is to get a good running game going today. So they can get a running game going to get that aggressive defensive line off balance. I think that'll help the Browns. But if they have trouble running the ball and Hoyer is forced to throw a lot, what was a few games ago, 50 passes, if it comes down to something like that, hey, there's going to be trouble.
How do they utilize Josh Gordon today? Is that another way, get him kind of going in that short passing game? We all know Josh Gordon is really good going down the field and catching the ball, but one of the underrated things about his game is that short passing game and his ability to run on end-arounds, things like that. Can they find creative ways to use Josh Gordon?
Well, they have to, but the other thing they have to be careful of is not to try to force things to Josh Gordon, because if you're going to force the ball to him, mistakes can happen. There's other receivers, and hopefully Josh Gordon can get those other guys open if the Bills are focused in on him.
Your matchup, you mentioned it. It was the pressure against the offensive line. How does this offensive line mesh together? They've played together a few times, but you still got Nick McDonald at center. It's still kind of a patchwork thing. How do they do it? How do they keep Brian Hoyer clean?
Just tell him to duck. Just say, get out of the way. The offensive line, they're pros. Joe Thomas is still on this team, but it's just going to be a tough task today. And they just have to be, as I talked to them earlier, they just have to be on their P's and Q's. They have to go to their basics, offensive line blocking one-on-one, as far as this defense they're going against. But as I said, it's just going to be trouble for them, and they just have to be able to yell if it comes down to it.
Other side of the ball, no Tashawn Gibson, but last week did a good job of getting pressure on Matt Ryan. Can they do that again today?
Oh, absolutely. They can do that today, and they're going to have to do that today for them to be successful. They're going to definitely put pressure on the quarterback. Now, the Bills, they don't have their starting tailback today, but then again, you know how the Browns have been against teams that don't have their starting tailbacks. All of a sudden, they find this new lease in life against the Browns. But as always in this game, you put the pressure on a quarterback, and that can also lead to success.
All right, we are nearing kickoff here in Buffalo as our cleveland.com pregame show continues. We will be back with Tom Reed shortly. Thanks a lot, Branson.
All right. Hey, Tom.
Tom's coming in, buddy.
And as promised, back with Tom Reed here in Buffalo. Tom, I asked the same thing to Branson. Did you park in the parking lot, or did you go with somebody's driveway today on your way in?
Oh, I parked in the parking lot. You didn't park in the parking lot?
I did, but I like the entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, of the houses around Ralph Wilson Stadium.
It's like at a golf tournament.
Stick a sign up, put $15 up there. It's a good deal. Browns and Bills, 1 o'clock. Branson and I picked against the Browns, and we did it because of the pressure that the Bills are able to generate. What was your pick in this game?
I waffled. I had more trouble with this game than any game of this season. And not that I've gotten them right, but I really went back and forth. I ended up going with the Browns with no conviction. I picked the Browns 16-14. My thought was first 1 to 15 wins this game. This is a heavy team, and these heavy teams have given the Browns trouble. I think back to Jacksonville. I think back to Houston. Like teams that can give, as you mentioned, pressure on Brian Hoyer. Boy, to me, it's a must-win game for the Browns today.
Yeah, and really one for the Bills too. And you know, you look at the situation. If the Browns lose this game, the Bills are tied with them, and you lose that tiebreaker, and the Browns are already struggling in tiebreakers. I mean, if they lose this game, I suppose they're not out of the playoffs, but it puts a lot of pressure on coming home to Indianapolis, coming home to Cincinnati.
Yeah, to me, they would have to win. They would almost maybe not win out, but they would almost have to win out. I mean, you're running out of games. That means you absolutely have to win in Cincinnati. I think you have to go and win in Baltimore too. So that's why this game is so important to me. Obviously, for Buffalo, it's a must-win. You just look at the rest of their schedule. I don't think they're going to make it just because of who they still have to play. But it's fantastic football. This is what you want at this time of year. And two great cities. Should be a great game.
How does Brian Hoyer bounce back? Obviously, we've talked about it. These are the games he's struggled in. These are the games where the offense has struggled in when he hasn't been able to be kept clean. So how does he bounce back in this?
Well, you have to hope that your running game's going. I mean, to me, they've got 40 to 50 passes are way too many for Brian Hoyer. They've got to get that closer. They've got to get back to that 50-50 where they were earlier in the year, running and passing. If they can run the ball, I think they have a good shot. But if they can't run the ball against this really good defense, it could be a long day because this is a terrific front. I'm sure as Branson has talked, Mary Kay has written about. It's a really good front four. And, Kyle Williams is a beast in the middle there. McDonald's going to have to he's going to have to play really well today because he's got a stiff challenge.
Defensively, no Justin Gilbert today. Of course, Tashawn Gibson is out. Now, Gilbert hasn't been playing a lot, obviously, but Gibson, the really big loss. Will the Browns be able to generate the kind of pressure they did last week against Atlanta, and will they still be able to be that opportunistic defense without Gibson?
Oh, yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's the big question. I mean, they've been on such a roll with turnovers. I think 15 in 6 games. This is the way you win in the NFL today. I mean, it's not everyone gets 300 or 400 yards. I think the most impressive stat, and it snuck up on me, is they are now in the top 8 in scoring defense, which is really, I mean, where's that been? I mean, they've given up tons of yards, but it's all about limiting teams to field goals in the league now because everyone's going to get their yards. They're playing pretty well right now. We'll see if they can keep it up. To me, it's more about Brian Hoyer not turning the ball over. If they don't turn the ball over, I think they've got a very good shot at winning today.
Yeah, last week, such an uncharacteristic game for Brian Hoyer. We've seen him struggle before. We've never seen him turn the ball over like that before, at least since that first start in Minnesota.
Yeah, and again, I think obviously a lot of it falls on his shoulders. Some of it, I just thought that some of the play calling was inexcusable down near the goal line when you had Crowell running the ball so well. And even Terrence West, I don't know what they were doing. I think, everyone was talking about Brian getting caught up with his new toy. I think Kyle Shanahan was guilty of that as well. But, Brian he's got to be a lot better today.
All right, Tom Reed joining us here on our Browns pregame show. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with Mary Kay Cabot. And as promised, back on our Browns pregame show, the final leg of our relay team, Mary Kay Cabot. The Browns and Bills about to kick off here at Ralph Wilson Stadium. A must-win game, really, for both teams. Mary Kay, I asked Branson, I asked Tom what their picks were. Who did you pick in this game?
You know what? I picked the Browns, but I will tell you it was a very tough decision for me. In fact, Tom and I went back and forth over it a couple times. At one point, I had him almost talked into picking the Bills because, you know what, you just look at this defense, you look at those numbers, you look at the fact that not only the obvious ones, but they're first in the NFL on third down. third down defense. And the Browns, of course, are 31st in converting third downs. So, that right there is a clash of the Titans. So I think that there are a lot of reasons why this could be a long day. But the difference could be Josh Gordon. Yeah. And, he's got another game under his belt. And I think he and Brian should be more on the same page this week. And, when Brian runs into trouble now with this very attacking defense, they have twice as many sacks as the Browns do. He can look out there for number 12, and there he will be.
One guy we haven't talked about on this show, and he's out again this week, Jordan Cameron. And it's really a tough story because this is a guy who has been so good for this team and has had concussion issues, and now he's going to miss another game with a concussion. Is it time to be a little concerned about Jordan Cameron's long-term future?
Well, you know what? He doesn't seem to be overly concerned about his future from a concussion standpoint, but I do think it's time to be concerned about him returning to the Cleveland Browns. This is the last year of his contract, and the season has not gone the way that anybody wanted it to because of the concussion, because of a sprained shoulder. And I just think that it sort of sets up both sides for maybe a parting of the ways after the season. I don't know if that will happen, but we know they're not even going to have a conversation until after the season is over, obviously. So, once you get to that point, a lot of times it just becomes more prudent for the player to want to go out and see what he can get on the open market. So I anticipate that will probably happen.
Back to what we have going on behind us, though, the Bills and Browns. How do the Browns deal with that Buffalo pressure and this really good Buffalo defense?
Well, first of all, you do have to run that football. You've got to run the ball, but you also have to be very, very careful about protecting that football. They have 22 takeaways. That's tied for third in the NFL. So this is another situation like the Texans were, where not only do they do everything well, but they also take the ball away from you. So they have to be very, very careful. It's going to be a big day for Isaiah Crowell, but I think they should use Terrence West too. I think they should give a change of pace with these two guys. So I think that the two of them should just kind of try to keep pounding it up in there. And even if they don't have immediate success, they cannot panic. They have to stick with it and try to get those guys to back off a little bit.
First game without Tashawn Gibson here. Obviously, they played a good part of last week's game without him. Jim Leonard now in the spotlight for this defense. What does he bring to this defense? He's not Tashawn Gibson, but what can he do for this team?
Well, he's got good hands in his own right, so he can get his hands on some footballs too. I think it's going to be a big day for the safeties, not just from a regular football standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint. We saw how Dante Whitner kind of got things spiced up during the week with he's in his little verbal war of words with the Buffalo Bills. So it's a big game for him. He put that target on his back for a reason. You cannot give a pregame speech every week. This is Dante Whitner's way of getting himself fired up and his team fired up. So emotional for him, emotional for Jim Leonard. Jim Leonard has something to prove from just a football standpoint, but it's also a homecoming game for him. He played here too. So I do think that, watch those two safeties. You'll see some big plays from both.
And this is why they went and got Jim Leonard, to have a veteran there who could step in if needed. So, this is exactly not to start necessarily, not to play a ton of snaps. That's where he's going to be, though, and that's why you wanted a veteran there in this situation. Is this a must-win game for the Browns?
You know what? I don't really like to say must-win game until it really is a must-win game, because I think it can be overused. But with all the AFC North teams at 7 victories, every game is crucial. Every game is vital. I do kind of like to say must-win for you're facing elimination from the playoffs. Yeah, you're virtually there if you lose any game the rest of the way, but not quite must-win yet for the Browns. But again, you just can't say enough. At any given day, one of these other teams is in the AFC North is going to clinch this thing.
What was your score prediction? Low-scoring game?
No, not too low scoring. I've got the Browns winning by 24-23. Again, you know what? It does depend on how Brian Hoyer plays today, and can he bounce back from that game. I watched him in that locker room. I watched him in his post-game press conference, and he was so upset with himself, and he said it would carry throughout the week. What he has to be concerned about is throwing interceptions in this game. He has thrown 4 in his last 2 games compared to only 1 touchdown. So he's kind of off track a little bit. Now, will he be back in sync with Josh Gordon enough today to the point where he gets back in sync with touchdown passes versus interceptions? He's got 6 interceptions in his last 4 games compared to only 2 in his first 7 games of the season. So things have kind of shifted for him a little bit. He needs to really bounce back from that game.
All right, Browns-Bills. One theme, even though a lot of people pick different things, is a close game. Maybe that's good for the Browns. We've seen how they've performed in close games this year, especially when they've needed a drive at the end of the game. Mary Kay Cabot joining us here, wrapping up our Browns pregame show. Of course, my thanks to Branson Wright and Tom Reed, who were on earlier. I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.